been a good book to me because you get to see faithfulness, what faithfulness looks like in the middle of a storm, in the middle of chaos. But you also get to see, like today, you'll see something where it's like everything that they've possibly done is like come to a screeching halt. Have you ever done stuff in your life where you did like certain things that were really good and all of a sudden it just like shut off overnight? Like you didn't feel like doing this or you didn't feel like doing anything. Like I think a few years ago I had this inclination in my spirit to want to go for a run, and I wanted to start running again. Now I ran either a lap or 4 laps. I can't remember, either a lap or it was a mile. And I remember thinking, I can't do this anymore. And that was like 4 or 5 years ago, and I haven't ran since. It's like all of a sudden you go to a screeching halt because of fear that I'm going to hurt my knees or whatever. But I want you to think about your life. I want you to think about the storms that you face. I want you to think about facing opposition. That's what we're talking about today. Ezra, from ruin to restoration. They were in the process of doing good things for God, and all of a sudden opposition came your way. Have you ever done something good for God and you faced opposition? Say yes. Okay? If you don't do things for God, if you choose not to do things for God, you probably won't face legitimate opposition. Like the devil doesn't have to work overtime for you if you don't want to serve God. So if I don't experience storms in my life, I get a little nervous. Like, what am I doing wrong? But if I'm facing storms and going, okay, God is getting me ready for something major in my life. And so I want you to think about way back in the book of Exodus. Remember we studied the book of Exodus, I don't even remember, last year sometime. And we talked about Moses, and then we talked about Joshua. And remember the story? They go out from the Egypt, and they go into the promised land. They go to the wilderness, and they get to the promised land exactly where they need to go, and they're facing the river. They know that God could part the sea because he did it before. And then they send people in there and they say, we're scared. And so they choose fear, and they turn around, they wander, literally wander, and they're the ones that instead of, they don't know when to stop. They're going around the track 1,000,000 times. Like, let's just keep going around and around and around. For a whole generation, they chose disobedience, and they chose not to go where God was going to have them because they chose to just go to a screeching halt with their faith. They chose fear over faith. And you can't really mix the both. The Bible talks about fearing God. That's a completely different type of fear. Okay? That's like an honor and respect, like, this is God, I am not. You know what the best part of that song was? It's been a prayer since day one in my life. Lord, you are God and I am not. That one prayer, that one confession has radically changed my life because I don't have to be in control of everything, even though if you're human, you want to be in control. You want some sense of balance. You want some sense of sturdiness. You want some sense of at ease. But when everything's all upheaval, you're like, oh, I'm nervous. God, you are God and I'm not. What they realized at the promised land crossing, they're like, I know you're God and I'm not, but I'm fearful. I know you're good. I know that you are stronger than them, but I'm afraid. So I'm going to go back. And then finally, Moses dies, and then Joshua is called into leadership. And then they finally get back to the same spot. And then God says, he says this. He actually has a command. Be strong and what? Courageous. Why does he say that? Well, he says, get ready. Buckle up and get ready. Because you're going to face opposition in your life. When you get into where God has you to go, you will face opposition. When you do something good, see, people always ask me that all the time. It's such a cliche question. It's a good question, but why does God allow bad things to happen to good people? It's a great question. It's a question I've heard 1,000,000 times. It's a question that I've asked. You know why good people have bad things happen to them? Because we face opposition all the time. We're at war. We're at battle. If you think this is a cruise ship, you're in the wrong church. You're reading the wrong book. There's my Bible way over there. You're reading the wrong book if you don't think we're at war. This is a spiritual battle that every one of us is facing. And don't be surprised when you make a step for God that the enemy, the devil, wants to work overtime in your life. He'll walk past 30 people that don't care about God, even though I believe bad things happen to bad people too. I get it. Okay? But he'll go past 30 people and they go, I'm going to choose the good, like the person that is serving God. And I'm going to, because we've had that question in our household. How come us? The people that are going, they don't care about God. Things are going pretty decent for them. And so this is what happens in this. And so when you say yes to Jesus, he gives you a sword, right? The sword of the Spirit. I'm not talking about, but it's a battle. He gives you a sword and he gives you command. This command is be strong and courageous, trust in him, fear not, fret not, walk and march forward and do what God's calling you to do. Don't let opposition, don't let fear, don't let doubt, don't let depression, don't let that bring you to a screeching halt. It's like when you're driving on the highway or wherever and there's a deer that crosses you, what do you do with your foot? Hit the brake as hard as you can or speed up. I don't know which one's better. It's either one. You make the judgment call, right? We've been pretty lucky, with the deer thing. But for a few times I've said, okay, my brakes work. Probably not anymore, right? When you hit the brakes, you're like, ooh, that kind of burned some brakes there. But we're jumping into Ezra chapter 4. So I want you to turn there. And Ezra chapter 4 is a turning point in the book. So far, in my opinion, it's been a decent story. Like half of the people of God are excited. They worship every single little bit. And then all of a sudden, they face opposition. Now, my question to you before we read it is how do you respond when you face opposition? Maybe it's not a person, but it's a situation you find yourself in. You say yes to God, and all of a sudden, you can't do it anymore. Because here's a little secret. Not everybody's going to want you to go with God and keep God center focus. They're going to call you crazy. They're going to call you a zealot. They might not use that word, but you know what I mean. They'll call you religious. And like me, they call me Ned Flanders. If you ever watch The Simpsons, this guy is a super religious guy, and I take that as an insult because I don't want to be that way. Okay, and I do laugh with him because it's kind of funny. But anyway. Maybe because I look like him. I don't know. But I love this. Ezra chapter 4, verse 1 and 2. Think about this. The people of God have rebuilt the altar. Remember that? And then a couple years later, they rebuilt the foundation. Remember what they did? What did they do right after they rebuilt the foundation? What did they do? Remember last week? They worshiped. At least half of them did. The other half, what'd they do? Weep. Remember, it was a loud celebration and a loud crying. I think it was like half of them over here were weeping. Half of them were shouting with joy and singing songs and hymns and spiritual songs. And you couldn't tell one from the other. You're like, okay, half of them are crying, weeping because everything's going so slow. God is slow on his promise, they said. And then all of a sudden they're going, okay, now we've got a foundation. We've got our altar. We've been worshiping. Now, what do you do? I said this last week. What do you do if you have a mess and you want to rebuild everything? What do you do? Where do you start? Somewhere, anywhere. Pick your spot and you pick up that stone, remove it. If you want to build a wall, I want you, Dwayne, to focus on that wall. Alice, I want you to focus on that wall. Marley, I want you to focus on that wall. Can you do that? Are you good? You good? Get a hammer, get some nails, do some good stuff, and start somewhere. And finally, they have all these cedar logs. And a few guys grab a hammer. A few gals grab a hammer and nails. And they go, here's your nails. Here's a hammer. What do you need? And they go up there and they're ready to put up the first beam. And there's opposition. Now, how coincidental is that? That's because the devil didn't want the temple to be rebuilt. The devil doesn't want you to celebrate God. He wants you to be depressed. He wants you to be down. He wants you to be discouraged. He wants you to go, you know what? Well, I guess this is God's will in my life. So verse 1 and 2, it says, when the enemies of Judah, say enemies. Okay, I want you to think about that for just a minute. We read this so quick sometimes. We're like, okay, think about who is going to be talking here. Are they friendly just by those words? Do you think they're friendly? No. What are they? Enemies. They're enemies of specific groups of people. Do you remember the 12 tribes of Judah? Now this is all the tribes of Judah they know where they come from. They know if they're from the tribe of Judah or Benjamin. They know that, but there is not specific tribes anymore, like in like locations, if you will. Everything's messed up at the time. They're all, the borders of every tribe that they live in is all messed up. But the enemies of Judah and Benjamin heard that the exiles were building a temple to the Lord, the God of Israel. They came to Zerubbabel and to the heads of the families and said, let us help you build, because like you, we seek your God and have been sacrificing to him since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, who brought us here. Pause. These two verses, do you find something a little strange right here? Like, you think, oh, that's kind of nice. They're helping. Who does the author identify them as? The enemy of Judah and Benjamin. They did not have the best interest for the people of God. Trust me. And not only that, I find it interesting when I'm reading this, something else stood out. It says, we seek whose God? Your God. Okay? We're not seeking God. We're not seeking the God that I serve. We're not seeking the God of God, King of Kings. We're serving your God, which to me is a red flag. It always has been. That they don't personalize it. If they do have a relationship with God, they don't personalize it. I don't know if they're given a half-truth. I don't know. Because they're very specific. Ever since the time of Esarhaddon, king of Assyria, I don't even know who that is. I'm sure I could figure that out if I do a little research. But they make a historical mark of when they started serving the God of Israel, their God. But listen, the author Ezra, who we'll meet in a little, not today, but we'll meet at some point, that he's a scribe. He's the one that he wants the reader in on a little secret. These are not friendly people. These are opponents. These are people who want to take what God is doing and stall it. He wants everything that God is doing to be stopped. And God, listen to me. God's will can never be stopped. It can never be altered. It never change. But I will say this, because of personal experience, it can be stalled. The will of God will always take place, but the timing sometimes is stalled based on not only enemies, but how we respond to it. Okay? God's will was always rebuild the temple, because for them that was the key for their relationship with God. If we can build a temple, we have a place to go where we can worship, we can feast, we can sacrifice, we can party, we can celebrate, we can worship, we can study the scriptures, we can do all sorts of stuff. And then these guys come up and say, "Hey, psst, we love your God." That's like having a guy that is a secret 49er fan that has a 49er jersey underneath his shirt. He's like, "I'm a real big Seattle Seahawk fan. I just want to come to your house and celebrate." And I'm like, "Wait a minute. I see some red underneath. I see a red shirt. I think you're not telling the truth." "Well, we really love Russell Wilson. He's such a wonderful, wonderful quarterback." "Wait a minute. Let me see. Let me see that shirt that you have on." "Oh, I knew it. You're not a Seahawk fan." It's kind of like this. Like the author knew, hey, these people are horrible. Now, I want you to rewind the tape here for a minute. We've been studying this for a while. Okay, this is week 5, but we've been studying like Daniel in this for a long time. We've been in this part of the Bible for a long time. Okay, I hope it's okay with you to park here for a little bit, because as a country, as a church, we face opposition all the time. Okay, so this is so important. It is kind of funny that God's timing is so specific, okay? I plan my sermons, but I don't always put the pieces together always how they're supposed to be. I don't always think ahead, well, if this happens at this time, then it will match. This is really going to be very helpful for all of us, okay? When we study this, I want you to think about where they've come from. They've come from sin. They've come from disobedience. They've been in captivity for 70 years. God brought them back. They promised them, "I'm going to bring you back." They show up. There's rubble. There's ruins. They've kind of cleared things off. They've kind of rebuilt some of their homes. They've rebuilt some of the cities. But this temple, the center of their faith, everything, they left it in ruins. But then they started doing a little bit here and there. They did the altar. They rebuilt the foundation. Those are some wonderful things. Then they start saying, hey, Wade, why don't you put that wall up right there? Can you put that wall up? And the moment he gets his hammer ready, these people show up. "Hey, we just want to help. We just want to help." There's opposition. They hit a roadblock. Isn't that just like life? The moment you say yes to God, you hit a roadblock. it is interesting in my life. I remember when I was first a Christian. When I was first a Christian, I went out of the, I went out like, if it's like a track meet, I went out of the race really quick. When I gave my life to Christ, it wasn't because no one made me. I purposely went up to the altar and I gave my life to Christ because I needed God. I needed God to forgive me. I need forgiveness. I wasn't a perfect child whatsoever. I wanted so bad God, and God changed my life. But then the moment that I started like wanting to serve God with ministry and teaching Sunday school and doing all that kind of stuff, even in high school, I wanted to teach Sunday school, and I did. And the moment I did that, I hit some roadblocks. So from that moment on, I have realized that the moment that you say yes to Christ, you will face roadblocks, because the enemy, if he can't stop you, he wants to discourage you. And discouragement will cause a lot of people to completely slow down or stop. How many of us have ever been discouraged? Have you ever been so discouraged to the point that you quit whatever you're up to, whatever you're doing? I have. Like, I'm so excited about something. These people are so excited about rebuilding this temple. Remember? They were worshiping. They were celebrating. And all of a sudden, the brakes, there's like a deer coming right towards them. And they hit the brakes, and they stop their car, and like, oh, I'm so scared of this, I'm going to pull over, and I'm going to park right on the side of the road for a while. And so these enemies of Judah and Benjamin, two specific places, they come down to Jerusalem. Hey, we see that you're doing something cool. Can we help? We just want to help. And the cool thing is that the people are very discerning. The people know exactly what's taking place. And I want to personalize this message for a minute, because I don't want this to be a history lesson, even though I love history. I love studying Bible history. But more important than Bible history is, what in the world does this have to do with us today? I want you to think about your life. When you take a step of faith, when you say yes to Christ, I hope you are, by the way. I hope that each one of us, you don't listen to the naysayers or the gripers and complainers or the people who are trying to dissuade you. Don't listen to them. You serve God, and the only voice that you need to listen to, obviously God uses people. He uses, you can't use this rule for everybody. Like, when people when they want to encourage me and stuff, of course I listen to that. Or even correction, I listen to that. But when I know a person is in my life that is a direct enemy of God and they want to dissuade me or discourage me, I got to ignore those voices. I got to ignore all that noise. And I got to listen to the voice of God. Because when you say yes to Jesus, when you take a step of faith, do not be surprised when the enemy takes a bigger step than you do. The enemy takes notice. See, the enemy, Jesus promised that he would be defeated at the end of time. He would be in the lake of fire. But for some reason, and I still don't know this reason, I'm going to ask God when I get to heaven. It really won't matter then. But I'll say, God, why did you still allow Satan to kind of reign and rule on this earth while, is there a reason specific? Maybe some of us in this church know the answer to that. But I do know a reality. The devil is still reigning here on earth, and we see it all the time. And when you say yes to Christ, you're running this race called Christianity, and the devil's trying to trip you up. He'll throw things your way. Kind of reminds me of Super Mario Kart. You ever play Super Mario Kart? It's a fun game. Like, you're driving your little go-kart in Mario, and all of a sudden someone throws a banana peel, in front of you, and you hit an oil slick, and you're like, you spin around. As silly as that sounds, that is really what the devil is doing. He can't stop you he can't force you and pin you down from not doing God's will, but he can definitely discourage you. He can definitely throw an oil slick in front of you, and if you're not paying attention, by the way, because some Christians just don't pay attention. They're like, whatever, God's good, and he's just going to do whatever he wants, and we fall. But we got to be alert. We got to we got to watch for those banana peels, for those fiery darts, if you will, of the enemy. Now, I love what it says in verse 3 through 5. It says this: But Zerubbabel, Joshua, and the rest of the heads of the families of Israel answered, You have no part with us in building a temple to our God. So they know who they are. You know what that tells me? I tried to read between the lines. You know what that tells me? They've met these people before. That's how they know. They're outsiders. It could be their accent. I don't know. I have no idea how they know. Okay? We alone will build it for the Lord, the God of Israel. Who are they building that temple for? They're building it for God. Okay, what are you building in your life? Are you building it for God? Are you building it for yourselves? Are you building it for something else? They're building this thing for God. And he says, as King Cyrus, the king of Persia, commanded us. Okay, now that's good. Okay, I want you to, as we move on from this and go to the next line, think about this. These people come forward, we'll help you. And they say, let me just wrap this up in this part of it. No. You're not helping us. We're doing this for God, and you're not from God. You're here to discourage us and distract us. And if you don't believe me, read the rest of it. It says, then the peoples around them, talking about these people that came, they set out, they set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. Pause. The enemy is always good. He's going to set out, and he has this mindset that when he's waiting for you to take a step of faith. This is why it's so important. Because many people take a step of faith, and then the moment they get opposition from the enemy or from someone else, they push the brakes, and then they're done. They step off their car, and they walk away from God. And maybe not walk away from God, but they walk away from serving God. They say, that's it. Not worth it. I didn't sign up for this. But church, the fact is, if you signed up to be a Christ follower, here's what you signed up for. To be able to face opposition with faith and endurance, and fear not. Be bold and courageous. Do not fear. Do not fret. See, I more than fear, I fret. That's kind of the same. But do not fret. Do not stall your relationship with God and the call of God in your life. You keep going. And look at this. I underlined this because it was just so important to understand how long this took place. They bribed officials. These people. They go back to Persia. Remember, if you didn't get this last week, I want to remind you, the people of God are home, but they're not in charge of their own place. The Persians own them. Okay, when reading this, remember that. This is why half of them are not happy, because they understand that God doesn't really own them yet. God doesn't control them yet. God does not have his way. These people are owned by Cyrus, a good king, yet he could turn on a dime like that if he needs to. They bribed officials to work against them and frustrate. Say frustrate. They bribed officials to work against them and to frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Okay, so right here we have two kings. Cyrus, who we know, and all of a sudden we're introduced to Darius, who, if you read the Old Testament, if you read Zechariah, if you read Haggai, this is the king that they're talking about during the time of rebuilding the temple. When they finally get to rebuild the temple, it's during the reign of King Darius. Now, I read that, and I'm going, wow, okay, I have to study that a little bit about how long that was. We'll get in a moment how long that really was of a wait, because it wasn't just 6 months down the road. Okay, now, but before that, I want you to think about the word discouraged. Okay? The peoples around them set out to discourage the people of Judah and make them afraid to go on building. I want to personalize this. When you serve God, you don't have to serve God in a specific ministry way. No one tells you this is where you're going to serve. This is between you and God. Where is God asking you to serve? How is God asking you to serve him in this community, in this world, in your dorm, in your home? How is God asking you to serve? Now, when you say yes to that, you say, Lord, I want to serve you with everything. I want to serve you at the school. I want to serve you at the store. I want to serve you in my business. I want to serve you in this. I want to serve you in that. I want to serve you in the church. The enemy is going to come towards you to try to discourage you and make you afraid to continue on. Now, see, if the enemies of God can't stop you from doing God's will, he will discourage you. And I like to even think that the more than trying to stop you, the enemy tries to discourage you. because he wants you to wave the white flag and be done. Like, okay, God, I'm done. I still love you. I hope I go to heaven, but I'm for sure not going to serve you anymore. Listen, God never, ever asked anyone to sign up for this Jesus life and sit at a cruise ship and just relax until Jesus comes back. That's never how God calls people. He calls you to go on a battleship, not a cruise ship, where you are manning your specific location. God calls you to, Dwayne, you got to go over here. Alice, you got to go over here. Michelle, you got to go over here. And you man that until God tells you to move. If God says, okay, you're done with that spot, we need you over here. Okay? If you're on some cruise, if you're on some battleship and you're like, oh, that needs to be manned, I need to go there right now, and God is calling me, go there. But if we're not in some, I want to go on a cruise ship someday, but I heard it's very self-serving. You know, you could eat all you want. Yeah, bummer, huh? That would be awesome. You're in control of your own destiny there, right? Like my pastor led me to the Lord. He said, him and his wife Lisa, they went to a cruise a few times. He said, Joel, it's worth it. Go someday. Go on a cruise. Okay, I will. Someday I will. It's still on my bucket list somewhere. But that is not the way that God called anybody to this kingdom life. And that's where the church has gone wrong. I mean, I noticed that in the church, talking about capital C, when I was first a Christian. Not everybody. There were specific people that I looked up to and I said, wow, these people, it's more like they're manning a battleship than a cruise ship. And I go, I want to be just like that. That's how I want to live my life. I want to be someone that's on a battleship fighting against the enemy. I don't want to, in a spiritual sense, to be on a cruise ship and I'm sitting in this chair with the foot's up like that, and then I got my iced tea or I got my lemonade, and I say, bring me some more, right? Fill this up, right? Come on, let's go. The guy comes up and he serves you and he's like, here you go. What else do you want? Give me the hamburger over there. But it's 8 a.m. I don't care. I'm in control of this. You go, right? I don't see myself, and I never want to be like that, because this is what happens when you're in a godly relationship and you sign up to be a Christian. You sign up to be on a battleship. You might not have known that. Maybe no one told you that. But from your experience, you know that you're at battle, right, against the enemy. How many of us know that, right? Always. When you're at a cruise ship and you're not manning your station, someone's going to come against you and you're not going to be ready for it. You're just like, I'm out of here. I'm going back in my cabin. I'm closing the door. Don't bug me, right? You look into a little window. And you're like, no, don't bug me. I'm in here relaxing. Okay, I'm relaxing. But when you're on the battleship, Lord, where do you need me? And there's going to be times where you're going to be attacked. And the longer you stand strong, be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous. It says, they're actually like saying, no, you're not going to help us. Then it says the peoples around them set out, discouraged the people of Judah, made them afraid to go on building. That is a real physical threat. Let's take this outside, they're saying. Let's take this outside. And then in verse 5, they bribe the officials to work against them, and they frustrate their plans during the entire reign of Cyrus, the king of Persia, and down to the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Now, we're not going to read the rest of this chapter. You can do it on your own, but what you see is you see letters. These people not only bribe, like, here's some money, here, why don't you take some money, and frustrate their plans. Stop them from doing God's will. But they also write letters that what I would call fake news. Because remember, Cyrus, and specifically Persia, the people of God are owned by Persia and Cyrus. At any moment, Cyrus could just pull in his reins and go, you know what? I changed my mind. So what they write letters to, I wrote them down. It's like, if you let these people rebuild, they're going to be rebellious towards you, Cyrus. Remember, they've been good. Remember, you've been good to them. What if they turn their backs on you and they frustrate you and they make it living hell in your life? Or in other words, oh, Cyrus, these people, remember, they're not going to pay their taxes towards you. You need money, right? And that's what they're throwing. And oh yeah, and by the way, here's some money. Why don't you take some money and frustrate them? Now, look at this in verse 24. I want you to read verse 24, and I want you to take it in and read it with a little bit of emotion. Remember, King Cyrus is the king, right? Am I right? He's the king of Persia. And then they frustrate the plans of Israel. And it says, verse 24, thus the work on the house of God in Jerusalem came to a what? Say standstill. Standstill until the second year of the reign of Darius, king of Persia. Pause. That should frustrate you. That should cause you some concern. That should cause you to be a little sad. Remember, what's God's will for the people of God right here? Go back to the promised land, rebuild the temple, and live for God forever and ever and ever and ever, and make it about God. And all of a sudden, they stop the work of the temple. It's a complete standstill. Like, think if Dwayne was in charge of the walls of if you're in charge of that wall, and you're so afraid of the enemy, you're like, you know what? I'm getting all my tools. I'm putting them away in my shed. You see those logs? See those cedar logs that we were given? We better put them someplace safe so they don't get wet and they don't get destroyed. We better keep them for later. That's how they closed up shop, if you will. They were done. The will of God was just stalled. The will of God was at a complete standstill. Now, that's not a big deal if it's like a few months. It was 30 years of standstill. 30 years. What's wrong with these people? Have you ever noticed that the people of God in the Old Testament are so stubborn and they're always waiting? It's not just a year, it's always for decades. Have you ever noticed that? Always decades. Like they can't get it into their thick head that God is in charge. They've seen so much of what God could do, and they realize, I've got some of this negativity towards me. Oh, these naysayers, these negative Nancys, they're all like towards me and against me. And I'm just going to go in a standstill because I'm so mad and I'm scared. Because Cyrus, he thinks I'm not going to pay my taxes. I better be scared. Maybe Cyrus will kill us. Then Cyrus is dead. And then another king shows up. He goes through his entire reign. He's dead. And then Darius shows up. And that's when finally, you'll see later on, they start rebuilding the temple. Imagine being part of this group. You're in celebration mode almost all the time when you're back. You build the temple, you build the altar, celebrate, worship. You're having feasts, you're eating meals, your family's finally back together where you're supposed to be, and then you rebuild the foundation. You're like, yes, awesome. And then you get excited because Dwayne shows up and he says he's got a hammer, he's got nails, and he's got strength. Like and I get excited. I'm like, yes, Dwayne, thank you for helping. Thank you. And then all of a sudden you have people that show up that they don't physically stop you, but they discourage you. And they say lies about you to the king, who has been good to them. But they're trying to sway this goodness to be, no, we don't want any more goodness from the king to the people. And they go on a standstill. Now, I want you to think about your life, because we've all done this. Again, this is a great history lesson. They go to a standstill. In fact, they don't start rebuilding the temple until you'll find it in the book of Haggai. In fact, in the book of Ezra, in a few chapters, if you turn to it at some point in your week in reading, you'll see the name Haggai, you'll see Zechariah, two prophets that you find in the Old Testament. And that was during the King Darius era of Persia. So that's 30 years later. So 30 years of stalling, 30 years of no action. But then I asked the question when I was doing my study, what did they do for 30 years? Now I got to give them credit where credit's due. They prayed. They worshiped. They sought God and said, God, we're so scared. We need you, God. They did that for 30 years. Now, at some point, when you're worshiping and you're praying, you got to keep moving forward with God and not just being in a standstill and going, I can't move forward. I'm stuck right here. I am praying. I'm worshiping. God's saying, you know what? Pray and worship, but take the next step. Go forward. Take the next step. You know what's interesting about them? They actually wrote songs. There's a psalm in the Bible that's written during this time. It's from the sons of Asaph. And I love that because it's the descendants. And there is many scholars, because of what it says in the chapter of Psalm 85, that talks about this very same time. They're in waiting. God, are you going to do something against our enemies? God, we're waiting for you to do something. And so let me look at Psalm 85 for a second, because when they're waiting and they're frustrated and they're fearful, how do they respond? They respond by singing praises to God. How do you respond when you face opposition? Now, I'd like to go up to the people of God and go, you know what? I'm glad that you were worshiping and praising, but you were stalled for 30 years. Like worship, you know, it's funny. You can grab a hammer and some nails, and you can lift up that piece of wood, and you can sing praises to your blue in the face at the same time. You don't have to be stalled. You can trust God and keep moving on, even though there's some type of, opposition. So Psalm 85, it says this: You, Lord, showed favor to your land. You restored the fortunes of Jacob. See, so far so good. They've been talking about what happened the last couple of years. You forgave the iniquity of your people. Remember, they were in sin for 70 years. And you covered all their sins. You set aside all your wrath, and you turned from your fierce anger. Pause. Now, there's a change here. Now, restore us again, because they've been kind of backtracking a little bit. Restore us again, God, our Savior, and put away your displeasure towards us. Will you be angry with us forever? Will you prolong your anger through all generations? I love this, because remember what we're talking about: ruin to restoration. I almost thought about ruin to revival. But will you not revive us again? Will you not restore us again? God, you've done it before, do it again. That's a prayer I've done in my life. God, you've done it in my life before, do it again. Show us your unfailing love, Lord, and grant us your salvation. I will listen to what God the Lord says. He promises peace to his people, his faithful servants, but let them not turn to folly. They're experiencing anything but peace right now. Remember, when you're praising God, you're praying to God, you're speaking in faith. You're speaking in what doesn't really exist in your life, but what you know to be true about God. God is the author of peace, not chaos. And they're experiencing chaos, but they're trusting that God's going to bring the peace. And they won't let them turn to folly. Surely God's salvation is near those who fear him, that his glory may dwell in our land. Pause. In their minds, how would they believe that God's glory may dwell in their land? A temple. A temple. We know that not to be true. We know that the temple of God's Holy Spirit is us. He resides in us. His glory is in us. But in the Old Testament Jewish mindset, they had to rebuild this house of God so that God's glory may reside in. Remember, Jesus hadn't showed up yet. So this is what they were reduced to, having a building that they needed to go to where God's presence may reside. They want him to dwell in their land. Love and faithfulness meet together. Righteousness and peace kiss each other. I like that. I just like how faithfulness springs forth from the earth and righteousness looks down from heaven. The Lord will indeed give what is good, and our land will yield its harvest. Yeah. Sorry, I said yield. It will yield its harvest. Pause. What's their land look like right this second? Not that good. They're speaking in faith again. Our land will yield its harvest. Righteousness goes before him and prepares the way for his steps. I want you to put yourself in the shoes of everyone in this story that we read today. So you're tempted to run away from God. You're tempted to serve other false gods. Because, by the way, those people that were trying to dissuade them from doing that and discourage them, they were trying to make them serve other gods. These people have been serving false gods for 70 years. You know, bad habits are hard to break. So some of them were tempted to go back to their old ways. They were tempted to go back to their old life. Your life is new in God, but there are times where you're tempted to go back to your old ways. Temptation is strong, church. Temptation is strong. Temptation is never a sin, but acting within the temptation is a sin if you keep going towards it. Temptation gives birth to sin. But I want you to think about 30 years of waiting. Now, I'm going to be very honest here. Whose fault is it that they waited 30 years to rebuild the temple? Was it the enemy's fault? It really wasn't. Nobody put a gun to their head. Nobody said, you better stop or I'm going to murder you. They might have. We don't know. They were fearful of them. No one came up to them and grabbed them around the neck and said, you will not build that. It was all words. It was all scare tactics. It was the people of God's fault that they did not move forward for 30 years. They did good things. They prayed. They praised. They sang songs. They wrote hymns. They wrote psalms. They wrote songs to sing that people still sing to this day. You know what? Those are great things, but they forgot 50% of what you're supposed to do. You sing, you praise, you pray, and you move forward in God, and you do the will of God in your life. You don't pause that to do this. There is this idea of worship and work that go together hand in hand. Sometimes we think we got to pause our work to worship. Man, we got to understand that God, He has a will for your life. He has a will for this community. He has a will for this church. He has a will, and it's bigger than just yourself. But you can't just freeze and pause that. You'll be waiting for 30 years. That's pretty pathetic, in my opinion, because Haggai goes, you guys are doing wonderful for everything else, but the temple stays in ruins. How many of us have ever read that in Haggai? Right? I have. The first thing you'll read is, man, you guys have I'm paraphrasing, but your houses look like mansions. They're beautiful gold. There's some beautiful stuff there, but the house of God lays in ruins. That's exactly what it says. That's what Haggai's job was, to tell the people that God wants you to rebuild the temple, rebuild the house of God. It's been long enough. See, so when you read Haggai, it's not just a random book of the Bible. This is why I've been trying to want to help you, is to see this story goes along with this story, and this book goes along with this book, because the Bible is not accidental. God has a plan, and He has a plan for you today. God is trustworthy. God is in charge. And I pray this, God, would you do it again? Because that's exactly what they pray. Because they say, God, we know that you're good. We know that you restore. We know that your revival is yours to give. You've done it before. God, please do it again. So as we pray, I want you to do what they do at the very end. It says they will listen. Let me look at what it says. It says, we will listen to you, God. We will listen to you, God. We will listen to what God says. So I want you to take a moment as we close in prayer. This is a season for most of us, if not all of us, a season of listening. As a country, at the sound of my voice, at the recording of this message, we are still in chaos. Our country is a mess. It really is. No matter the outcome that you want, or no matter the outcome of how it's going to be a mess. Okay? You can't really split it anymore 50-50. Half the people are over here, half the people over here. The question remains not with the country. The question remains towards the church. How are we going to respond? My inkling, my spiritual leaning is what I feel God is leaning in my spirit. It's, church, we're in a season of listening and seeing what does God want. Because we always assume God's will. Don't we? And I've been assuming God's will a lot. I say, God, I don't know your will, but I'm going to pray what Jesus prays. Your will be done on earth as it is in heaven. That's it. God, I know what I think needs to happen. See, some trust in chariots, some trust in horses, but I'm going to trust in God. I love that. So as we pray for not only you, but pray for the country. Pray for, I'm sure I know you have, but pray that you would stand strong in opposition. This is huge because you will face opposition. I don't know who this is for. I don't know who this message is for. I have no idea. But I know that we all face opposition, but maybe you're in the middle of opposition right this second. Or you're in the middle of discouragement right this second. God says you are not to stop. You are to keep moving what God has called you to do. But at the same time, you need to turn your ear towards him and listen. What is he saying? What is God saying to you? What is God saying to our country? What is God saying to the church around the country? We need to listen, and we need to respond godly. We need to respond with love, with peace, with patience, with kindness, with goodness. We need to pray that God would have the fruit of the Spirit over the church, but he has the control. We need to allow God to be in control and let God do what God does. We're going to trust him. Father, I pray for each one here. I pray for peace to reign in their minds and spirits and hearts. I pray that you would remind us that you are God and we are not. You are still God. You still reign. You're still mighty. You're still loving. You're still merciful. You are still patient. Lord, you still have a plan. Lord, you still have a plan for your church. You still have a plan for this country. You still have a plan for this world. You have a specific plan that will take place. No enemy can thwart it. No enemy can stop it. No enemy can slow it down right this second. Because right now, you're at work right now. We choose to do a different path than what the Israelites did in this story. We will not wait 30 years. We will not wait 2 years. We will not wait until everything's perfect. We'll not wait until this or that, the other thing. We will actually be in your will and move forward, and we choose to be on that battleship. We will man that battleship exactly where you've called us. If you called us to a specific place on the battleship, we will go to that spot, and we will stay in that spot until you call us elsewhere. And God, I pray that each one of us in this room and anyone watching later on online, they realize that it's not about a cruise ship, it's a battleship. And it really is. It's a battle that we're going to win. We already have won. We just got to keep going. We just got to keep going. We cannot lose. This is an unlosable battle. We win. And I thank you for each person in this room. I thank you. In Jesus' name. Everyone said, amen. God bless you. God bless America, right? I just did that right there.